So thanks everyone for tuning in. I think it's great to have three lucky and an awesome guests here today. I think I'll just give you kind of a brief introduction of the three, and I'm sure they'll talk about themselves anyway. But we have Callen here, who is holding it down, and then on the Aussie side of the world with an early morning start, has an awesome job title of Defi Envoy, which I think is the best name in the biz, representing Wintermute, and I'm sure you're all aware, but Wintermute is a large market maker on dYdX. We have Max from Xenophon Labs, who I think most of you already had contact with, who's produced a number of grants and really stepped up the game when we think about the level of contributors in the dYdX ecosystem. And then finally, we have Omer from Chaos Labs, who really has been producing quality grant after grant and recently announcing the perpetual funding rate page, which is incredible. I think just briefly, the dYdX Foundation is starting a new governance discussion series that will generally be scheduled sort of bi-weekly opposite to the Epoch Review and AMA, which I think would be awesome. And the goal of this is to really reach consensus about any DRC submitted, and this specific one by Callen from Wintermute to revise the LP rewards formula. I think the dialogue on Commonwealth is starting to slow down, so we're really hoping to have and to move to a snapshot proposal by the end of this week. And we have included kind of a number of questions pre-populated to kind of address the concerns from Commonwealth there. And from now, I guess, Josh, I could potentially hand it over to you or Callen to give a background on all things about the recent LP rewards formula revision post. Cool. I'll hand it over to you guys.
Happy to jump in real quick. I guess just a huge shout out to Wintermute, Callen, and Evgeny and team for putting this together. I think super nice to see a proposal coming from one of the LPs specifically, and also one of the LPs who's currently benefiting from the formula as it stands today. Also, a huge shout out to Reverie, who without enabling community grants, a lot of this research from Max and from Chaos wouldn't be possible. So I know they're not in attendance, but it's super important to kind of recognize all that they're doing with that. I think with that, Callen, if you just kind of like to maybe talk about the current state of the rewards formula and where the motivation for the proposal came from, I think that would be super helpful. Over to you.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start with motivation and sort of how this idea came about. It's sort of been in the back of our minds, and I think quite a few other people's minds for a few months now. Especially in Evgeny's mind himself. But it was really brought to light when Mueller posted their proposal to incentivize spread on the Commonwealth form, and there was a lot of great discussion amongst LPs in the community. And in that forum, Evgeny expressed that ideally the discussion should focus on understanding what type of liquidity dYdX wants to incentivize, as well as finding a way to reduce the barriers to entry for LP competition and equitable distribution of rewards, right? But in general, Wintermute has always sort of been in favor of increasing the competition amongst LPs. From a long-term perspective and dYdX's ensuing transition to full decentralization, we thought it was important to start pushing towards robust liquidity, which is arguably the backbone of any successful exchange nowadays in crypto. And that sort of brings us to our current proposal, highlighting issues with the current type of liquidity dYdX incentivizes for, and sort of how implementing maker volume may solve some of these issues. And I would say that the main sort of issues that are arising to the current LP reward system is, one, there's a lack of competitive LPs, and that's largely due to the way rewards are calculated and dispersed. It depends heavily on stake dYdX, as well as an LP's ability to show their size in the dYdX order book, but not necessarily, how active they are at the top. So yeah, we're at a stage where there's two LPs. One of them sits very deep in the order book, yet earns roughly, 40-45% of the rewards, and then we have ourselves, which are a little bit more active, doing about 20% of the maker volume each epoch, and earn roughly half of the rewards as well. However, just in general, having 90% of rewards go to LPs is not really sustainable.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. I think super beneficial, to get more market makers kind of participating in LP rewards and seeing like a larger dispersion among LPs gaining those rewards. I guess just curious, could you, just for people, I guess, who are new to the community, just kind of run through the two proposed solutions, A and B, that you posted, and then kind of, I guess, fill people in on which proposed solution you're leading to right now?
Yeah, sure. So I'll kind of give a brief overview, and then if people want to ask a bit more in-depth questions, I'm happy to answer that as well. So we have two proposed solutions, A and B. So A sort of keeps the current reward formula that is already implemented, but introduces a few changes. The first change introduces maker volume into the reward formula, and that's denoted by B. The second change reduces the weight of depth, spread, and stake dYdX. And an optional third change that we've also put in there is the idea of a rewards cap, which is 2 times the maker volume for an eligible LP address. One important thing to note with proposed change A is that the new weights sum up to 1 besides uptime, and this ensures there's constant return to scale. This means it's a lot better for smaller LPs to sort of, get distribution of rewards, as larger LPs can no longer significantly increase their reward share by compounding their depth and stake dYdX score. And that's just because currently, the current formula has increasing returns to scale. Therefore, it's a lot easier for someone with a lot of size and stake dYdX to compound their rewards. B is quite similar. It also tries to introduce maker volume into the calculation of rewards. And this is done through a G-score, which is just the equally weighted geometric average of the proportion of Q-score and maker volume for a given address. The formula is simply proportion of maker volume times the current Q-score for an address. And this product is then weighted across all LPs and rewarded proportionally. I think the easiest way to think about, proposed change B is that LPs who do well in both Q-score and maker volume are rewarded, but are also penalized if they only perform well in one aspect. So I guess answering the last part of your question, Josh, on what's Wintermute's preferred solution and where we would recommend to go, I'd say we're more in line with proposed change A. And mostly if depth and spread is weighted by 0.35, volume is weighted by 0.4, and stake dYdX is weighted by 0.2. And this is for a few reasons, right? Firstly, when we come back to the idea of our end goal and achieving equitable rewards and desired liquidity, change A provides a simple modular approach that will allow us to change parameters more easily than B. This is particularly important as to us, when we implement this change, it's a game of iteration, and given we have taken more of a theoretical approach to our suggestions, change A will allow us to incentivize certain behavior if that's needed after reviewing, the ensuing epochs if this proposal is passed. Secondly, the reduction in stake dYdX and constant returns to scale and change A, I believe, will be massively beneficial to increasing the number of LPs on the platform and also to improving the distribution of rewards. In contrast, change B assumes the current Q-score formula, and therefore Q-scores are still heavily determined by size and stake dYdX, and that really doesn't sort of combat some of the issues we have outlined in the proposal. And then lastly, while proposed change B does do a decent job at introducing maker volume into the reward calculation, LPs who produce a lot of maker volume are still not sufficiently rewarded, which I don't think should be the case. There are a couple of other concerns about underperformance in change B, but I'll let Omer and the team at Chaos Lab sort of discuss that as they did a really good sort of analysis of these effects.
Awesome. Thanks for that overview. That was super, super clear, well laid out. Yeah, definitely love the gradual approach that you guys are thinking about taking in terms of the weights, and not kind of jumping too deeply into overweighting volume. I guess next I see Omer has just joined. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Just wanted to turn it over to the Chaos Labs teams and yourself to kind of discuss, I guess, the grant application, I guess, like the basis of the research and kind of like your main findings.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick background. So Omer from Chaos Labs. Chaos Labs is a cloud platform that uses agent and scenario-based simulations to battle test DeFi protocols. We test them across a range of black swan events, but also do optimization of parameter selection for DeFi protocols. So we started working with dYdX probably a quarter ago as a grants program opened, and we worked pretty closely with the foundation and kind of the community to kind of identify what are the high area impacts to which we could contribute. LP rewards design and analysis was one of them. So for those of you who are like on the forums, we posted our full analysis of the current formula, as well as some feedback on the formulas which Callen just spoke about, which are currently being proposed and iterated on. And so for the full breakdown, feel free to refer to the post, and I can link to it here in just a bit. But generally, the findings are in line with what has been seen over the past few epochs. So currently, if the goal is to encourage meaningful market making and also have it such that it's a playing field which is attractive for new market makers to enter. Until now, that hasn't necessarily been the case, which is why we're happy and agree and we're excited to see kind of the proposal coming out from Wintermute. Just a lot of times the distributions are skewed and didn't take into account all of the parameters that we think is necessary, volume being one of them. So that's already an improvement. Having said that, the first formula proposed, while it's definitely an improvement on the pre-existing formula that's currently in production, there are still issues there that we think can be improved upon. So I think the TLDR of the chaos research is that the proposals that Wintermute put forward are an excellent step forward for the community. And we anticipate this to be like an iterative process where after deploying these updates and changes to the formula across different epochs, we'll have more data that we can kind of gather and analyze and make further suggestions to really improve the distribution of rewards across market makers in a way that really just encourages a super kind of fair, balanced ecosystem moving forward, because we believe that's really the most important thing for the dYdX community, that there's a lot of diversity when it comes to market making. And lastly, thanks to the foundation for helping us collaborate on this and being a great partner, and also kudos to Wintermute for taking the initiative of doing the research and putting forward the proposals.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I guess, Omer, right back to you. I was just curious, kind of based on the post that you guys put up on Commonwealth, could you go into a little bit more depth just about what goes on inside of the simulations, just so the community kind of has a better understanding of what's going on the research side?
Yeah, absolutely. So within Chaos Labs, we utilize two different types of simulations, or at least two different environments for simulations. One is an on-chain simulation environment, and this is where we literally fork the blockchain. So we support currently all EVM chains, Terra, and here around the corner as well. Deploy a catalog of agents and scenarios. So agents are these entities which emulate user behavior. Scenarios are more like macro changes to a blockchain environment. But having said that, that was less relevant for dYdX, as the protocol itself is not yet completely deployed on chain. What we did for dYdX is use our economic simulation engine. And this is a proprietary kind of environment where we basically model the dYdX protocol, and specifically the distribution of rewards based on the different input data that there is. So everything from volume to, you can just go through all the parameters that we have there, bid depth, spread, ask depth, etc., etc. Now, when we're running these simulations, we want to run tens of thousands of them over a wide range of parameters, so that we can reach results which are statistically significant, let's say. And with this information in hand and with the analysis and results of the simulations we run, we can kind of make very, we can make basically accurate predictions of how things will play out over time, and also start examining outliers in data. So after constructing the modeling of the formulas, what we did is we actually looked at all the data across the past 7 epochs, I believe, and then really set a range for all the parameters based on the data observed in production. Once we had that range, we started running we saw the distribution of each parameter in each epoch. So some of them are kind of look more uniform, while others are distributed more normally. And then on top of that, we run all the simulations, generate a report based on the findings and the results. And that's what we use basically to make all of our suggestions and improvement proposals for the data.
Awesome. Yeah, there was a lot of rich findings there.
Yeah. Sorry, do you mind if I jump in and also ask, like, I know you said it's proprietary, but can we get like a little bit more information about the economic simulation engine?
Yeah, sure. So the proprietary, so when it's on chain, everything is completely verifiable. And part that's proprietary is basically just a cloud that's able to run thousands of simulations at scale. And then the economic simulation engine is just a question of modeling. Like, how are you going to model this? There are a lot of different kind of languages and tools that you can use in order to build kind of the models. Whether it's frameworks that utilize Python and data science libraries, or R or MATLAB, really depending on what you need for the simulation. I believe that most of the simulations that we did for dYdX are Python based, even though there could have been some other frameworks that were used in other languages. And then it's just a matter of constructing the data. The first step that we do is make sure that we, basically with the data set that we have, we run historical data to make sure that the results are accurate. That's how we test basically that the models work, and verify that. And then once we know that that works, we start running our simulations with the parameters that range across different distributions. So once you have that, you run those at scale. And yeah, within a few tens of thousands of simulations, you have results that you can start looking at, deconstructing, and start really seeing where the outliers in data are.
Awesome. Just one more follow-up from me, Omer. Specifically, I guess, just like on the kind of like the conclusion of the post, it seems like the Chaos team was leaning towards G-score as the preferred method. Just curious if you could touch on kind of the benefits and the risks that you outlined in the post, and whether you're still feeling that like the G-score method is the right way forward.
Yeah, sure. So like I touched on earlier, we think that G-score is an improvement on what exists today. It eliminates a lot of the outliers that we saw over the first few epochs, and really factors in volume in a way that's significant and important moving forward. Having said that, the process of generating the input parameters already identified some outliers and basically use cases which are still problematic, and can result in lopsided reward distribution. So while like on a whole, it eliminates a lot of the problems that we've seen until now, it still has its own sets of problems, which are outlined in the analysis, and that's kind of the reasoning and the motivation behind basically proposing the G-score adoption as a step moving forward, but really to think of this more as like an iterative process, where we're going to use basically the following epochs to collect data and make better informed decisions, versus a final decision where, this is it moving forward and we're not going to change it. There's simply not enough data yet across different epochs, not enough market makers to be able to make like decisions that are, with high levels of confidence. And that's why we think that the next epochs are going to be important. And in general, it should be something that the community adopts like a flexible mindset to, that as we do new things and we have more information, we're always happy to iterate upon it and improve the current offering of the protocol and the reward distribution at that point.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll just echo what you said there. I think it's super important for the community to realize that, like, a lot of these changes, or all of these changes, are not final. Definitely, there's a lot of you will, like A/B testing going on to find out like what works as the protocol kind of grows and develops. Thanks so much. I guess we'll move on to Xenophon Labs and Max. Max, do you mind just touching on kind of, I guess, the grant that you worked on, kind of how you carried out your research and what your main findings were?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Max Holloway, founder at Xenophon Labs. In Xenophon Labs, we do protocol design consulting, and right now dYdX is one of our main customers. And previously, we've done a few different grants, and perhaps most relevant to this is the grant that we did in Trader Rewards that recently went to a DIP that passed. And yeah, so the Trader Rewards formula is pretty similar to this formula, although the Trader Rewards one is a bit simpler. There's this similar mathematical form, like Cobb-Douglas scoring function, that is used both to compute Q-score in the current formula and is used in the Trader Rewards. So it's it was a pretty easy shift to look over at the LP rewards. And so yeah, we took a look at this and provided some thoughts. However, I will clarify that there was not like a grant for Xenophon Labs to work on LP rewards. This is we don't really, we're just like community members on this, interested community members. Yeah, so I left a number of comments in Commonwealth that anyone is welcome to read, but yeah, I think overall I was really impressed by proposed change A. I was a bit more skeptical of proposed change B, and yeah, I'm overall just really excited. Any way that this turns out, I think it's directionally very positive. It's not a new problem for the protocol. That it was a very known problem for the protocol that there was this duopoly on rewards where a couple of large market makers were able to soak up a lot of the rewards without taking on a lot of volume. And so I think a lot of people are going to be happy. A lot of market makers are going to be happy to see just anything in here passing is a step in the right direction. So overall, that's my mindset coming into this. Is it's definitely important to narrow down on which of these changes are going to be best for the protocol. However, I think we're already doing really well just by starting the conversation and making some changes.
Awesome. You had an interesting.
Hey,
David, you want to?
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
Sorry. Can I just ask a follow-up question and just reiterating a point that was kind of already made? When we designed these initial rewards formulas, right? I think it's important to reiterate that the protocol was in a very different place, 7-8 months ago. At the time, we really didn't have the amount of liquidity that we have today. And when we were designing, in particular, the LP rewards formula, we were trying to get to the level of Binance or FTX liquidity. And certainly on Bitcoin and ETH perpetuals today, we have more liquidity than both of those centralized exchanges, which is a huge feat. And so I think now, it's really encouraging to see kind of community members actively look at, all of the rewards programs, the staking pools, et cetera, and really iterate on those models and try to improve them based on the market structure that is, relevant today and not what was built or conceived 8 months ago. I do want to reiterate the point that like any of these changes are iterative, right? And I think it's important to have this ethos of A/B testing and making a change that's directly in a step forward, and then collecting more data and continuing to monitor the impact of those changes and continue to view these formulas as something that really should change based on the current market structure and the current dynamics of how they play out. Again, it's really hard, frankly, when designing formulas to really understand kind of every fringe case. I think to everyone's credit, like no one wanted or expected a strong concentration of rewards, but that has resulted in, again, the liquidity that we wanted to compete. I think that, all of the arguments and trade-offs that, collectively this group and other community members and market makers have identified are all extremely relevant. And ultimately there's no silver bullet that kind of addresses everything. But there's always going to be trade-offs, and where we are today is what are the series of trade-offs that we're willing to make to incentivize the behaviors that ultimately contribute to the long-term sustainability of the protocol. And so, just wanted to say, obviously appreciate all of the work that's been done so far. I think the discussion has been incredible, and just viewing all the different opinions and thorough analysis is, I think, very encouraging for the community at large over the long run. I do want to reiterate that as part of the governance process, and hopefully through a lot of these discussions, is we do need to get to a binary kind of proposal, to be kind of in line with kind of the governance standards that we did lay out. I think, based on my read, and this is my personal opinion, from kind of the forum discussions and just understanding everyone's kind of contributions here, it does seem like structurally people agree that either formula is a step in the right direction to incentivize the behaviors that we understand today. I think the big open question is just, what the variable, what the numbers for those variables should be. And again, I guess I'm curious to hear from this group, how they think about kind of the latest, two proposals that have been submitted. And again, which one in the short term is a step in the right direction that allows us to get more data and test without significantly impacting the incentives that are created, with the ultimate goal of having the community rally around a set of one proposal, that again is a step in the right direction, but it, is likely to be an iterative process and subject to future changes in the future.
I can just start really quickly by summarizing our view on it. So like I mentioned earlier, G-score is an improvement on Q-score from a lot of different kind of points of views, and I think it solves for a lot of the issues that we've seen until now. I think by the end of this week, we should have our research published and available for the second formula proposed in the Wintermute discussion. So I think we'll comment more on that async. But as far as G-score goes, we're not we think it's definitely an improvement. So if we want to start experimenting in the upcoming epochs, I think that's a good idea. And I think we'll be able to give a more complete and holistic opinion about which is better from the two to start with by week's end. But they're both certainly looking better than what exists today in production, for at least from the kind of angles that we're looking at it. So that is kind of our proposal. And again, just to reemphasize that this is an iterative process, and I think probably take a few epochs till we get it to a state where it's stable and something that we're all happy with. But I think that's expected, and that's fine.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in. I already sort of mentioned it at the start of this call for Wintermute's views. Generally, we're for proposed change A, and in the forums we have reiterated that the weighting that we prefer is to have volume weighted at 0.4, depth weighted at 0.35, and stake dYdX weighted at 0.2. And this is for a couple of reasons. I know in the discussion on Commonwealth, there has been a few liquidity providers and market makers who are suggesting to actually heavily weight volume by 0.7. However, we kind of think that this is maybe, too far on one end of the spectrum, especially considering that, maker volume is not incentivized for at all on the platform. And as, we continually talk about an iterative process, we think that the best way forward is firstly to introduce the idea of maker volume into reward calculation in sort of like a soft integration way, where it's added but not heavily weighted in comparison to depth. However, then assess, per epoch, and understand sort of the distribution of rewards and the order book we're seeing on dYdX, and also sort of seeing the type of flow that's coming into dYdX as well. And then, from this analysis, we can then come back and suggest maybe some changes in parameters. Maybe we do think that volume should be weighted a bit more. Therefore, we will create another proposal to change the parameter. So just in general, I think we prefer taking more of a soft approach, where volume isn't incentivized too heavily at the start, but maybe a goal that we can work towards per epoch.
Yeah, I'd also say that the volume being weighted at 0.45, although it's the more gradual approach than weighting it at 0.7, it's still going from being weighted at 0 to be weighted at 0.45, right? Like that's quite a large change. So like I think it. Yeah, I don't get the feeling that weighting volume at 0.45 is too small of a step, especially considering the mindset here is that it's going to be an iterative process.
Awesome, thanks for that, guys. I guess one question from my end was just how are you guys thinking about the option for the cap? Have you guys kind of moved away from including the cap in the formula?
I'll go first, Matt, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I mean, there's been a lot of discussion in the forum in general. Most seem to be opposed to the cap or sort of don't understand how it works. I know Max has talked about it a lot, but I'll just give a brief overview to the community to help them understand what the cap is. Essentially, there's two issues that stem from this cap, and I would say that's probably why the discussion has gone this way. One is the cap typically distorts the behavior of LPs, and maybe invites some avenues of gaming. There's also the added complexity with just introducing a cap in general, right? So the cap takes a minimum of 2 times the maker volume share and the Q score of an address. What this effectively does is 2 things. One, it caps the rewards for an LP who has a really high Q score but very low maker volume, i.e. they're very passive liquidity, something that we are trying to avoid. And 2, it caps the rewards for an LP who has really high maker volume but a low Q score, i.e. the quality of their liquidity may not be that great, and this could be due to, uptime or tiny size. So essentially, this cap tries to incentivize LPs to improve on their one-sided performance, limit the monopolizing of rewards, and reduce the overspending of suboptimal liquidity from a protocol perspective. However, a major concern with this is that if an LP's maker share volume is, say, 20% of the overall platform, which is quite a lot, and it's not easy to manage, and their Q score is greater than 40%, let's say 50%, they have no incentive to maintain a Q score above 40% because it's 2 times their maker volume. As the risk of providing liquidity is greater than the marginal benefit. This ultimately results in LPs acting in a less optimal behavior, and also penalizing liquidity that is actually good for the exchange. And so, that's just sort of a brief overview of how we see the cap and some potential issues maybe for the community to understand it a bit better.
Awesome, thanks for that. Max, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I also want to say thanks, Callen, for giving the overview. The cap is interesting because it's kind of a very simple approach of enforcing that people don't get too much rewards when they're not providing volume. So it's very intuitive to add it. However, whenever you think about if you enforce a cap and say that people can only get so much in rewards based on a multiple of their volume, then the question comes up, what do you do with the rewards that they're not getting? And so I believe there are two ways that I've heard that this could be addressed. So one of the ways that you could allocate these excess rewards would be to distribute them pro rata to other market makers. So what that would look like is, if, for example, Wintermute had a score that was more, that was very large, but their volume wasn't that high. And the excess rewards that they would be capped, that would be capped on them and that they wouldn't be getting, would need to be distributed to all of the other market makers who didn't reach their cap. And so this creates, for anyone who read the Trader Rewards paper or who's familiar with our analysis there, we looked at this analysis of, when people know how much they stand to gain, they can change their they will change their strategies in order to, maybe maximize their profits. I'm not saying everyone does this. However, especially in the market maker rewards, in the LP rewards, we observe a lot of rational behavior to maximize profits from market maker rewards. So introducing the second game, the initial game would be, how do I maximize profits by providing depth and volume on dYdX? And the second game is, how do I anticipate how much will be in these what I call scrap rewards, which are the rewards left over after the market makers who reach their cap. Like, how do I estimate those scrap rewards and then furthermore change my strategy for market making in order to incorporate the profits that I'll get from those scrap rewards? And that essentially makes it at least 2 times more complex for market makers to try to optimize this rewards mechanism. And anytime you increase complexity, it just is it's one of the easiest ways to lead to almost like anti-competitive behavior, right? The competition here should be who can provide the most value to takers on dYdX, right? Who can provide the most depth at the right prices on these markets. You really don't want all the efforts of the market makers to be going into maximizing profits from this rewards formula. So increasing the complexity of that mechanism is something I'm very weary of voting for. And so that's something that would likely happen with that cap. And then another thing that would happen with the cap that we haven't mentioned so far is, like, if you were to enforce that cap, and market makers who really do want to provide more depth have no incentive to do so after they get past the amount of volume that they're comfortable with. So this is definitely not great for the exchange from a marketing angle. Like David had mentioned, the amount of depth within 2% on dYdX just is a lot more than some of the leading centralized exchanges on certain pairs. And so it's not great to disincentivize that in an unnecessary way. And so that's something that the cap might lead to as well. So I think the good news is all of the good things that come out of the cap can be achieved by just increasing the volume weight in proposed change A. And so that's something that I'd be a lot more comfortable with, that I think makes more sense. Kind of from that more first principles approach and making it easier or more difficult, easier to maximize profits on the mechanism.
So I think that both Max and Callen brought up really good points. I think generally speaking, a lot of it is aligned. So the way that we saw it is that capping heavily incentivizes trading volume, even when the Q scores aren't that high. And I think this runs a danger. I think if we're making the base assumption that when we're looking long term at the ecosystem that we want to build in dYdX, that having diversity of makers is a priority, that makes it kind of difficult for a lot of the makers to justify prioritizing liquidity provisioning for dYdX. The other issue with capping is that in these extreme scenarios, again, when you do the distribution, if it's pro rata, it again skews towards Zola's volume, if that's a parameter that we're using. In order to determine who gets what. So I think something that I've seen in the forums, which I do like, is if we're doing capping and kind of redistribution, once caps are achieved, either to tie it closer to Q score so that we can reward, or G score for that matter, but also factor in the meaningful liquidity providing, but also have a cap for kind of the multiple that can be taken post pro rata distribution, and maybe have some of that go back towards the protocol. So we just want to avoid, when we were backtesting the data with the new formulas, there were a few outliers in the research where we saw, with kind of redistribution of rewards, some makers receiving over 100x rewards based on the volume that they had provided, and we want to avoid that. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think that's something that would deter makers from providing liquidity in the future. Like getting 100x is is a lot more than should be expected, and I don't think that's going to deter the real makers from providing liquidity. So I think that would be a good middle ground, even adding an additional cap post pro rata distribution and funneling those rewards back to the protocol for future epochs.
I also want to add on onto that point. In the case where we do decrease rewards, I'll say a trade-off of that is that there's likely going to be less of everything. The less rewards that go to the makers is going to decrease volume and depth. So yeah, I don't know. That's just one thing to be crystal clear about. If that's something that the community wants.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for the in-depth overview of the cap. Yeah, it definitely seems like I think we're moving in a good direction. Little bit weary of time. Just wanted to see, James, David, did you guys have anything else to add or ask before we open it up for one or two community questions?
No, nothing from me. I'm happy to go to the open AMA.
Give it a second.
Same. If there's any community questions, now's a good time to raise your hand.
Yeah, guys, if you want to ask a question to the entire, panel of speakers or just one specific speaker, just please kind of raise your hand and we can bring you up on stage to speak. Thanks.
Hi there. Can you hear
you? Yeah, Envoy, we can hear you. Giver.
Awesome. So yeah, for inviting me up to speak and all. Pretty basic question, I think, is that I'm hearing a lot about optimizing the formula for market makers, and I guess I'm just curious, is there an impact, or at least a significant impact on, let's say, less not market makers? How do you see the impact for sort of retail investor?
I can briefly answer this, I guess. This change will be for market makers, right? The benefits from this happening, and I guess just volume being introduced in general, is that retail is now going to be able to trade in environments where spreads are a lot tighter and you have a lot more liquidity at the top of the order book. So I think hopefully, in general, we will see that it's just an overall better trading environment, and hopefully a lot of the depth is not killed, it's still there. However, we just see more active liquidity, and I just think in general, from a retail and investor perspective, we hope to see increased volume and sort of smaller participation on dYdX as well.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. I just an overview, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Amfro. Mo, do you want to have your question now?
Yes, I have a question regarding this phenomenon, this issue that is happening about wash trading, and I wanted to know if there is any plans to work on a system or address this issue in the future, before or maybe afterwards. I just wanted to know if this is something that everyone's aware of and understands it is something that needs to be addressed sooner or later. The sooner the better. That's my question and or concern. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Bill. I'm happy to take this. Wash trading is definitely something that the dYdX trading team is actively monitoring. Over the course of.
Oh, I think we lost David there, did we?
Yeah, it looks like he's gone to the audience. I just invited him back up. Here he is.
Sorry, David, we lost you there at over the course of the last.
Cool. We could probably go back to David when he reconnects. Start well. It might be a good opportunity for you to interject there.
Okay. Yeah, I also have concern. Everybody probably is that and paying attention to it. I think it's really important how to incentivize wash trading. I think that personally, these are all my own statements. They're not reflective of any official dYdX stance, but as as a participant in the community and someone who's been here for a while, I also consider myself a community member. I think it's really important, especially because we do offer things like true rating awards, and we offer fee tiers. These are very common incentives which can they can help encourage that type of trading, and we don't want to encourage that. I've actually discussed in the moderation channel, which community members don't have access to because obviously it's for the moderators. Kind of one option. I don't know if it. I don't personally know anything about the matching engine on the back end because I'm not engineering. But I think one option that we could be looking at is looking at trade volumes and basically orders and using some time heuristics to make sure that there are no matched orders before the open market would be aware of them. That's just one like simple possible solution. Also having a set of market makers, or maybe what we call preferred market makers, it really does help in curtailing this type of trading. So I believe that really all we need to do is tighten up our algorithms and maybe our automated systems to, you can never prevent 100% unless you're doing like, even if you do full KYC, you could have someone, uncle or cousin, trading against them. You really can't 100% do it on any platform. But we can get reasonably close in a realistic way. Now, that was just my comment on that. What I want to ask is, will these new these LP reward formula changes, will they prevent someone like Coronas, who's only contributing, say, like under 1% of the volume, from taking like over 40% of the fee share? Because I don't think that's a really advantageous system. I do understand I understand the need and the interest in having deep order books. But I think that overall, it's also important to have the fee rewards going to people who are actively, honestly, in my opinion, actively not trying to game the system in a way that is maybe that is more PvP than it needs to be.
Yes, that's explicitly what this is for. Yeah.
Okay, cool, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. David, do you want to jump in and touch on that wash trading point that you were going to bring up?
I think he's having problems with his mic. You can see he's trying to unmute and mute.
Yeah.
I guess we can address this another time.
I think where David was going with this, which we can also address kind of later on in Discord, was dYdX trading does like actively analyze to identify wash trading. And like last epoch, for example, there were 14 addresses that we found were kind of clearly wash trading. And just so the community knows, like all of those addresses were removed from all of the rewards calculations and all of the stats that we provide in the Epoch Review and on Metabase. So just a heads up for everybody. I think we have one more community question. James, you want to bring him in?
Hey, can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah, you're good.
How can we how can we know that someone is wash trading before it's get too obvious? Maybe if we could just like do something with it.
Yeah, I can jump in there again. I'm not in the Eng team. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know the full extent of the analysis that they go through, but a simplified version is just like identifying common addresses that are trading against each other beyond like a certain interval. They're kind of identified as clear wash trading. Thanks so much for the questions, guys. Just kind of weary of time here. I think we're going to have to wrap things up. Just kind of wanted to remind everybody about the, I guess, next steps. So it seems like we're getting pretty close to consensus on like what we're moving towards for an LP rewards formula. Please, if you have any like feedback and points, add them to the Commonwealth thread that Wintermute and Callen started. In terms of next steps, this doesn't require like an on-chain vote. It'll be a snapshot vote, and you can see kind of the requirements for non-binding snapshot votes laid out on Commonwealth. So just The requirements, I guess, specific ones that are notable are the minimum quorum is 1 million dYdX, and the minimum vote differential for the vote to pass is 67%. And just kind of a reminder that with all of these formula changes, dYdX trading has like a 1 epoch grace period to implement the changes. Just to be conscious of kind of like the engineering bandwidth, knowing that they are heads down working on V4 right now. James, David, did you have anything else to add there?
No, I guess just finally from me, thanks Max, Callen and Omer for coming on. There's not many other places where you can really get three leading thought leaders in their respective fields and have a real respectful chat around all things governance for dYdX. So it was really awesome to hear just from my end, and I'm sure the whole community feel the same there as well. So thanks guys for coming on.
Yeah, I echo that. Super beneficial, I think, for myself and for the community to hear from you guys. I know it's one thing to kind of like read the posts on Commonwealth, but it's another thing to hear you guys present and have like an active dialogue with each other. So, you know, the dYdX Foundation team and the dYdX community, we really appreciate your time in coming on speaking with us today.
An hour.
Thanks for having me.
You.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Likewise, guys. We work with a lot of DAOs, and working with dYdX is always a pleasure. So thanks to the foundation, and thanks Max and Callen. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks very much.
Cool. I guess from my end as well, then I'll make sure that this is, hopefully we can try and transcribe this and put it on YouTube, which would be great. And then I can share it with everyone once that's come forward. And thanks for everyone in the audience who tuned in today. I hope you found that really helpful. Cool. Unless anything else, we'll close the stage and we'll catch up soon. Thanks, Max. Thanks, Callen. Cheers, Josh, for that.
No worries. Have a good day, guys. See you, everyone.
Thanks for hosting, James.